Ash Patel, the Director of the National Security Agency and Commander of U.S. Cyber Command, General Tim Hawk, and the Defense Intelligence Agency Director, Lieutenant General Jeffrey Cruz. Thank you all for your appearance. Thank you for your leadership. I also want to recognize the hard work and dedication of the thousands of men and women in our intelligence community whom you're here to represent today. Their successes are seldom celebrated. Their accomplishments are often unseen. But our nation is grateful to each one for the vital work they do to keep our nation safe, prosperous, and free. Our annual Worldwide Threats hearing allows for the American people to receive an unvarnished and unbiased account of the real and present dangers that our nation faces. As we will hear from our witnesses, many of the threats we face are truly existential. Communist China is actively working to replace the United States as the world's dominant superpower. China uses coercive military, economic, and influence operations, short of war, to shape a world favorable to its interests and hostile to ours. These methods include the biggest peacetime military buildup in history, rapidly expanding its nuclear forces, providing critical assistance to help Russia withstand U.S. sanctions, obscuring its role in accelerating the spread of COVID-19 beyond Wuhan, turning a blind eye to Chinese companies that enable the production of fentanyl flooding into the United States, and putting space weapons on orbit, among other tactics. Iran, despite setbacks inflicted on its so-called axis of resistance by Israel over the last year, still aims to destroy what it calls the little Satan, the state of Israel, and what it calls the great Satan, the United States. It continues to arm Yemeni rebels to attack global shipping, though these outlaws have suffered terrible losses over the last 2 weeks, thanks to decisive action by President Trump and our brave troops. I commend the President, Mike Waltz, Pete Hegseth, and his entire national security team for these actions. Iran also continues its decades-long effort to develop surrogate networks inside the United States to threaten U.S. citizens. Furthermore, Iran's nuclear program continues apace. It's actively developing multiple space launch vehicles, which are little more than flimsy cover for an intercontinental ballistic missile program that could hit the United States in a matter of years. But all this will soon come to an end. The supreme leader of Iran now faces a stark choice, thanks to President Trump. The supreme leader can fully dismantle his nuclear program, or he can have it dismantled for him. Finally, today's report also acknowledges that illicit drug production endangers the health and safety of millions of Americans. For the first time, the annual threat assessment lists foreign illicit drug actors as the very first threat to our country. As the report highlights, Mexican-based cartels using precursors produced in China continue to smuggle fentanyl and synthetic opioids into the United States. Last year alone, these deadly drugs tragically killed more than 52,000 Americans, more than the number killed in attacks by foreign terrorists or foreign nations. Given these threats, we have to ask, are our intelligence agencies well postured against these threats? I'm afraid the answer is no, at least not yet. As the world became more dangerous in recent years, our intelligence agencies got more politicized, more bureaucratic, and more focused on promulgating opinions rather than gathering facts. As a result of these misplaced priorities, we've been caught off guard and left in the dark too often. I know that all of you agree that the core mission of the intelligence community is to steal our adversaries' secrets and convey them to policymakers to protect the United States. At the same time, it's not the role of intelligence agencies to make policy, to justify presidential action, or to operate like other federal agencies. After years of drift, the intelligence community must recommit to its core mission of collecting clandestine intelligence from adversaries whose main objective is to destroy our nation and our way of life. The reason is not that our intelligence community lacks dedicated patriots who show up to work every day to protect the American people. On the contrary, it has an abundance of them. The reasons are a misuse of resources, bureaucratic bloat, a default to play it safe, and a past administration that prioritized social engineering over espionage. Coupled with recent failures, the finding in today's Worldwide Threat Report should be a wake-up call to all of us to get our house in order. The status quo is proving inadequate to provide the President and Congress with the intelligence needed to protect the American people. As more storms gather, America's intelligence capabilities require urgent reform and revitalization. As the chairman of this committee, I look forward to working with each of you to strengthen America's intelligence edge and refocus our intelligence community on its core mission, stealing secrets. The American people deserve nothing less. We've assembled an impressive team to get this done, and I look forward to hearing your comments. Now I recognize the Vice Chairman for opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everybody. I want to thank all the witnesses for being here. I got to say, I've been on the committee now for 14 years, and this year's assessment is clearly one of the most complicated and challenging in my tenure on the committee. And I want to get into that in a moment, but I want to first of all address the recent story that has broken in the news. Yesterday, we stunningly learned that senior members of this administration, and according to the reports, two of our witnesses here today were members of a group chat that discussed highly sensitive and likely classified information that supposedly even included weapons packages, targets, and timing, and included the name of an active CIA agent. Putting aside for a moment that classified information should never be discussed over an unclassified system, it's also just mind-boggling to me that all these senior folks were on this line and nobody bothered to even check Security Hygiene 101. Who are all the names? Who are they? Well, it apparently included a journalist. And no matter how much the Secretary of Defense or others want to disparage him, this journalist had at least the ethics to not report, I think, everything he heard. Question I raise is like, everybody on this committee gets briefed on security protocols. We're told you don't make calls outside of SCIFs of this kind of classified nature. We don't know, and I'm going to ask, obviously. Director Gabbard is the executive in charge of all, keeping our secrets safe. Were these government devices? Were they personal devices? Have the devices been collected to make sure there's no malware? There's plenty of declassified information that shows that our adversaries, China and Russia, are trying to break in to encrypted systems like Signal. I can just say this: if this was the case of a military officer or an intelligence officer and they had this kind of behavior, they would be fired. I think this is one more example of the kind of sloppy, careless, incompetent behavior, particularly towards classified information, that this is not a one-off or a first-time error. Let me take a couple minutes and review some of the other reckless choices that this administration has made regarding our national security. We all recall, it seems like it wasn't that long ago, but less than 2 months ago, in the first 2 weeks, the administration canceled all U.S. foreign assistance. Now, some may say, how bad can that be? It's foreign assistance. Well, U.S. foreign assistance paid for the units in Ukraine to provide air defense to civilian cities being attacked by Russia. Foreign assistance paid for guarding camps in Syria where ISIS fighters are detained. Foreign assistance paid for programs abroad that ensure that diseases like Ebola don't come home. And until recently, it paid for the construction of a railway in Africa that would have helped given the United States much needed access to critical minerals in Congo. Now that project, China's going to try to finance it. As well, in the first 2 weeks, Dr. Patel, the administration fired several of our most experienced FBI agents, including the head of the Criminal Investigative Division, the head of the Intelligence Division, the head of the Counterterrorism Division, the heads of the New York, Washington, and Miami field office, all individuals who were distinctly and directly responsible for helping to keep America safe. The irony in a little bit was the recently dismissed head of the Counterterrorism Division was involved in disrupting the ISIS attacks planned for Oklahoma City and Philadelphia, and helped lead the effort to bring to justice the key planner of the Abbey Gate bombing in Afghanistan that killed 13 US servicemen and 150 civilians. That very Abbey Gate effort was actually praised by the president in his State of the Union address. Yet the administration's response to these agents, I believe, good works and years of service, was to force these folks out. It's hard to imagine how that makes our country safer. Nor can I understand how Americans are made more secure by firing more than 300 staff at the National Nuclear Security Administration, including those responsible for overseeing the security and safety of the nuclear stockpile. Or by ousting 130 employees at CISA, the agency directly responsible for trying to take on China's Salt Typhoon attack. Again, after Salt Typhoon, I would have thought folks on that group chat might have thought twice. Or how we made safer by sacking 1,000 employees at the CDC and NIH who are actually directly working on trying to keep our country safe from disease. Or by pushing out hundreds of intelligence officers. The amazing thing is that our intelligence officers, they're not interchangeable like a Twitter coder. These intelligence officers, our country makes $20,000 to $40,000 of an investment just in getting a security clearance. Literally goes into six figures when you take the training involved. Can anyone tell how firing probationary individuals without any consideration for merit or expertise is an efficient use of taxpayer dollars? And just to make clear that yesterday's story in the Atlantic was not this rookie one-off, it's a pattern. I want to acknowledge Director Ratcliffe was not here in his position when this took place. But again, earlier in the administration, when a non-classified network was used, thereby exposing literally hundreds of CIA officers' identities, those folks can't go into the field now. How does that make our government more efficient? You know, again, this pattern of an amazing cavalier attitude towards classified information is reckless, sloppy, and silly. And perhaps what troubles me most is the way the administration has decided that we can take on all our problems by ourselves without any needs for friends or allies. I agree that we've got to put America's priorities first. But America first cannot mean America alone. The intelligence we gather to keep Americans safe depends on a lot of allies around the world who have access to sources we don't have. That sharing of information saves lives, and it's not hypothetical. We all remember, because it was declassified last year when Austria worked with our community to make sure to expose a plot against Taylor Swift in Vienna. That could have killed literally hundreds of individuals. However, these relationships are not built in stone. They're not dictated by law. Things like the Five Eyes are based on trust, built on decades. But so often that trust is now breaking literally overnight. Yet suddenly, and for no reason that I can understand, the United States is starting to act like our adversaries are our friends. Voting in the UN with Russia, Belarus, and North Korea. That's a rogues gallery if I've ever heard of them. Treating our allies like adversaries, whether it's threats to take over Greenland or over the Panama Canal, destructive trade war with Canada, or literally threatening to kick Canada out of the Five Eyes. I feel our credibility is being enormously undermined with our allies, who I believe, and I think most of us on this committee, regardless of party, believes makes our country safer and stronger. But how can our allies ever trust us as the kind of partner we used to be when we, without consultation or notice, for example, stop sharing information to Ukraine in its war for survival against Russia? Or how can our allies not only not trust our government, but potentially not our businesses with such arbitrary political decisions? Let me give you a few examples. As a result of a lot of work from this committee and others in Congress, we made sure America's commercial space industry is second to none. From space to launch to commercial sensing and communications, the United States has taken a record lead. Yet overnight, this administration called into question the reliability of American commercial tech industry when Maxar and other commercial space companies were directed to stop sharing intelligence with Ukraine. I gotta tell you, I've been a business guy, I can't say longer than being an elected official, but pretty close. That shockwave across all of commercial space, and frankly, not just commercial space, I've heard it from some of our hyperscalers in the tech community, has sent an enormous chill. Who's gonna hire an American commercial space company, government or foreign business, with the ability to have that taken down so arbitrarily? And it's not just in the case of commercial space. We've seen that Canada, Germany, Portugal have all been saying they're rethinking buying F-35s. I've heard from Microsoft and Google directly and Amazon that they're having questions about whether they can still sell their services. We've also seen foreign adversaries and friends take advantage of this rift in our national security areas and our scientists. Germany has already put out ads trying to attract some of our best scientists who've been rifted. And the Chinese intelligence agencies are posting on social media sites in the hopes of luring individuals with that national security clearance who've been pushed out, perhaps arbitrarily, to come into their service. So no, the Signal fiasco is not a one-off. It is unfortunately a pattern we're seeing too often repeated. I fear that we feel the erosion of trust from our workplace, from our companies, and from our allies and partners can't be put back in the bottle overnight. Make no mistake, these actions make America less safe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before I turn to the witnesses' hearing, I want to welcome everyone in our large audience today. I also want to note that we will not tolerate any disruptions of the witnesses' testimony or senators' questions and the witnesses' answers. You'll note that we have a large contingent of Capitol Police in the room. Any disruptions, either opposed or in favor to the witnesses, will result in prompt removal from the hearing room, and my encouragement to the U.S. Attorney to throw the book at the person disrupting the hearing. No offense, but we all came to hear the witnesses, no one else in the room. Director Gabbard, I understand you'll make a statement for the panel of witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity for us to be here to present you the intelligence community's 2025 annual threat assessment. I'm joined here this morning by my colleagues from the CIA, DIA, FBI, and NSA. Our testimony offers the collective assessment of the 18 U.S. intelligence elements making up the U.S. Intel community and draws on intelligence collection and information available to the IC from open source and private sector and the expertise of our analysts. This report evaluates what the IC assesses most threatens our people and our nation's ability to live in a peaceful, free, secure, and prosperous society. As you know, we face an increasingly complex threat environment that is threatening us here at home and our interests abroad. I'll begin by focusing on what most immediately and directly threatens the United States and the well-being of the American people. Non-state criminal groups and terrorists putting American lives and livelihood at risk. Then I'll focus on the key nation states who have the capability to threaten the interests of the United States. In this complex environment, non-state and state actors are able to exploit or take advantage of the effects of each other's activities. Conventional and asymmetrical capabilities, even the traditionally weakest of actors are able to acquire from available advanced technologies, creates an even more complex and serious threat landscape. First, I'll highlight the threats presented by several non-state actors. Cartels, gangs, and other transnational criminal organizations in our part of the world are engaging in a wide array of illicit activity, from narcotics trafficking to money laundering to smuggling of illegal immigrants and human trafficking, which endanger the health, welfare, and safety of everyday Americans. Based on the latest reporting available for a year-long period ending October 2024, cartels were largely responsible for the deaths of more than 54,000 U.S. citizens from synthetic opioids. Mexico-based transnational criminal organizations, or TCOs, are the main suppliers of illicit fentanyl to the U.S. market and are adapting to enforcement and regulatory pressures by using multiple sources and methods to procure precursor chemicals and equipment, primarily from China and India, many of which are dual-use chemicals used in legitimate industries. Independent fentanyl producers are also increasingly fragmenting the drug trade in Mexico. The availability of precursor chemicals and ease of making illicit fentanyl have enabled independent actors to increase illicit fentanyl production and smuggling operations in Mexico. Cartels are profiting from human trafficking and have likely facilitated more than 2 million illegal immigrants encountered by law enforcement at the U.S. southwest border in 2024 alone, straining our vital resources and putting the American people at risk. Criminal groups drive much of the unrest and lawlessness in the Western Hemisphere. They also engage in extortion, weapons and human smuggling, and other illicit and dangerous revenue-seeking operations, including kidnappings for ransom, forced labor, and sex trafficking. These and other human traffickers exploit vulnerable individuals and groups by promising well-paying jobs while confiscating their identification documents. They operate in the shadows, exploiting lawlessness in various areas and using coercion and intimidation to control their victims. While these key drivers of migrants are expected to persist, heightened U.S. border security enforcement and deportations under the Trump administration are proving to serve as a deterrent for migrants seeking to illegally cross U.S. borders. U.S. Border Patrol apprehensions along the southwest border in January 2025 dropped 85% from the same period in 2024. Transnational Islamist extremists such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda and affiliated jihadi groups continue to pursue, enable, or inspire attacks against the United States and our citizens abroad and within the homeland to advance their ultimate objective of establishing a global Islamist caliphate. This includes heightened efforts to spread their ideology to recruit and radicalize individuals in the U.S. and the West. While the New Year's Day attacker in New Orleans had no known direct contact with ISIS terrorists, he was influenced and radicalized by ISIS ideological propaganda, as one example. Al-Qaeda and its affiliates continue to call for attacks against the United States as they conduct attacks overseas. These jihadist groups have shown their ability to adapt and evolve, including using new technologies and tactics to spread their ideology and recruit new followers. A range of non-state cyber criminals are also targeting our economic interests, critical infrastructure, and advanced commercial capability for extortion, other coercive pursuits, and financial gain. These actors use a variety of tactics, including phishing, ransomware, and denial of service attacks, to disrupt our systems and steal sensitive and lucrative information using available technologies and U.S. cyber vulnerabilities. Ransomware actors last year, for example, attacked the largest payment processor for U.S. healthcare institutions. And another set of criminal actors conducted cyber attacks against U.S. water utilities. Some of these non-state cyber actors also operate as proxies for or emulate similar activities carried out by major state actors. While these non-state cyber actors often seek financial and intellectual property gains, they also carry out cyber operations for espionage purposes, targeting our critical infrastructure. Turning to key state actors, the IC sees China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea engaging in activities that could challenge U.S. capabilities and interests, especially related to our security and economy. These actors are in some cases working together in different areas to target U.S. interests and to protect themselves from U.S. sanctions. At this point, the IC assesses that China is our most capable strategic competitor. Under the leadership of President Xi Jinping, the People's Republic of China seeks to position itself as a leading power on the world stage, economically, technologically, and militarily. Beijing is driven in part by a belief that Washington is pursuing a broad effort to contain China's rise and undermine CCP rule. China's most serious domestic challenge is probably China's slowing economy and potential instability if socioeconomic grievances lead to large-scale unrest. Growing economic tensions with the United States and other countries could also weigh on China's plans for economic growth and domestic job creation. China's military is fielding advanced capabilities, including hypersonic weapons, stealth aircraft, advanced submarines, stronger space and cyber warfare assets, and a larger arsenal of nuclear weapons. While it would like to develop and maintain positive ties with the United States and the Trump administration to advance its interests and avoid conflict, China is building its military capability in part to gain advantage in the event of a military conflict with the United States around the issue of China's efforts toward unification with the Republic of China, or Taiwan. China's military is also expanding its presence in the Asia-Pacific region with a focus on disputed territorial claims in both the East China and South China Seas. Beijing is advancing its cyber capabilities for sophisticated operations aimed at stealing sensitive U.S. government and private sector information and pre-positioning additional asymmetric attack options that may be deployed in a conflict. China's cyber activities have been linked to multiple high-profile breaches, including last year's massive compromise of U.S. telecom infrastructure, commonly referred to as Salt Typhoon. Beijing currently dominates global markets and strategically important supply chains, for example, with the mining and processing of several critical minerals. In December, China imposed an export ban to the United States on gallium, germanium, and antimony, all of which are important to the production of semiconductors and our defense technologies. This was in direct response to U.S. export controls on chips designed to broadly limit PRC access to advanced chips and chip-making equipment. China also aims to compete in other critical global industries, including AI, legacy semiconductor chip production, biomanufacturing and genetic sequencing, and medical and pharmaceutical supply production. Leveraging often heavily state-subsidized production at greater scale, lower costs, and weaker regulatory standards than required in the West, Beijing's strategy has given it a leading position in many parts of these sectors and supply chains that support them. In 2023, for example, China had 5 first-in-class domestic drug approvals and 3 FDA approvals. Turning to Russia. Russia's nuclear and conventional military capabilities, along with its demonstrated economic and military resilience, make it a formidable competitor. Moscow has more nuclear weapons than any other nation that could inflict catastrophic damage on the United States and the world in the event of a major war that Russian leaders feared put them and their regime at serious risk. In late 2024, Russia announced updates to its public nuclear doctrine, expanding the conditions under which Russia would consider using nuclear weapons. Russia is building a more modern and survivable nuclear force designed to circumvent U.S. missile defense through reliable retaliatory strike potential. Russia intends to deter the U.S. by holding both the U.S. homeland at risk and by having the capabilities to threaten nuclear war in a conflict. Russia's developed advanced cyber capabilities and has attempted to pre-position access to U.S. critical infrastructure for asymmetric options and make it a persistent cyber threat. Russia's cyber activities have been linked to multiple high-profile breaches, including the 2023 hack of Microsoft. Russia is also fielding new capabilities and anti-satellite weapons meant to degrade U.S. and allied space infrastructure. Among Russia's most concerning developments is a new satellite intended to carry a nuclear weapon as an anti-satellite weapon, violating long-standing international law against such activity and putting the U.S. and global economy at risk. Iran continues to seek expansion of its influence in the Middle East, despite the degradation to its proxies and defenses during the Gaza conflict. Iran has developed and maintains ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and UAVs, including systems capable of striking U.S. targets and allies in the region. Tehran has shown a willingness to use these weapons, including during a 2020 attack on U.S. forces in Iraq and in attacks against Israel in April and October 2024. Iran's cyber operations and capabilities also present a serious threat to U.S. networks and data. The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. The IC continues to monitor closely if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program. In the past year, we've seen an erosion of a decades-long taboo in Iran on discussing nuclear weapons in public, likely emboldening nuclear weapons advocates within Iran's decision-making apparatus. Iran's enriched uranium stockpile is at its highest levels and is unprecedented for a state without nuclear weapons. Iran will likely continue efforts to counter Israel and press for U.S. military withdrawal from the region by aiding, arming, and helping to reconstitute its loose consortium of like-minded terrorists and militant actors, which it refers to as its axis of resistance. Although weakened, this collection of actors still presents a wide range of threats, including to Israel's population, U.S. forces deployed in Iraq and Syria, and to U.S. and international military and commercial shipping and transit. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is pursuing stronger strategic and conventional capabilities that can target U.S. forces and allies in the region, as well as the U.S. homeland, to bolster North Korea's leverage and stature, defend its regime, and achieve at least tacit recognition as a nuclear weapons power. Kim's recently cemented strategic partnership with Russia supports these goals by providing him greater financial, military, and diplomatic support, reduced reliance on China, and providing North Korean forces and weapon systems authentic warfighting experience. Kim views his strategic weapons advances since 2019, its deepening ties with Russia, and North Korea's economic durability as strengthening his negotiating position against Washington's demands for denuclearization and lessening his need for sanctions relief. North Korea is probably prepared to conduct another nuclear test on short notice and continues to flight test its ICBMs to demonstrate their increasing capabilities as leverage in future negotiations. Since 2022, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea have grown closer. Removing the accelerant of the war in Ukraine is unlikely to revert these bilateral relationships to a pre-war 2021 baseline, leaving room for new strategic priorities and world events to create new incentives or challenges to their currently high levels of cooperation. Russia has been a catalyst for much of this expanded cooperation, driven heavily by the support it has needed for its war effort against Ukraine, including protection from U.S. and Western sanctions. In addition to its exchange of military and other resource capabilities with North Korea, Russia has relied more heavily on China's financial and defense industry backing, and also has increased combined military exercises with China to signal shared fortitude against the United States and U.S. allies in the Asia-Pacific region. With Iran, Russia has also expanded financial ties to mitigate sanctions. Iran has become a critical military supplier to Russia, especially of UAVs, in exchange for Russian technical support for Iranian weapons, intelligence, and advanced cyber capabilities. In conclusion, the threats that we see to U.S. national security are both complex and multifaceted and put the lives, safety, and well-being of the American people at serious risk. As the heads of the American people's intelligence community, we will continue to provide the President, Congress, and our warfighters with timely, unbiased, relevant intelligence to keep the United States secure, free, prosperous, and at peace. To the American people specifically, our intelligence community exists to serve you and to ensure your safety, security, and freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gabbard. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, the annual threat assessment for the first time lists cartels and traffickers as the very first threat. Director Patel, I'm pleased to say that the FBI's Little Rock field office has been doing its part in addressing this threat. The field office, along with other federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies, have arrested nearly 300 immigrants in my state in